In just 3 days, state workers and Seattle city workers must show proof of vaccination or they could be shown the door. Thank you for joining us. Of a reprieve or an extension here for any of these workers?
No, none. At least from Governor Jay Inslee, he made it very, very clear that there was never going to be an extension. There was never going to be a reprieve, and he's moving forward with this. Now, we should note the majority of state workers complied with the mandate, but we do know that hundreds have not, leaving all of us to sort of wonder what exactly the fallout from this is going to look like. Well, we can't predict the future. Based on most recent vaccination data, we do have some idea.
It is Tuesday, October 19th. Workers who failed to meet the vaccine deadline are now out of a job. The Seattle Police Department is in a Phase 3 mobilization.
All non-patrol personnel are all reporting to work in their uniforms and available to deploy to 911 calls if staffing if any of the 5 precincts requires it.
Even the SPD officers and sergeants who brief the public may instead be called out. Already slow response times get worse. At the Seattle Fire Department, a similar scenario. Stations are short-staffed, several units have been taken out of service, some firefighters trained in specialty rescue, like Josh Gibbs, are no longer employed.
I'm very angry. But I'm trying to hold it together for my family.
Out on the roads, an already short-staffed state patrol is now stretched thin, and there are fewer Department of Transportation workers to cover the highways. Hanging at the Wenatchee WashDOT outpost, a tribute to those who were fired. And a foreshadowing for a tough winter ahead, with fewer plow drivers to clear the passes. At the state's largest school district in Seattle, 142 bus routes have been canceled, leaving parents scrambling to get their kids to school. A similar situation is playing out on the water as an already beleaguered ferry system cancels more sailings, worst case scenario for those who live on the islands.
I have health issues that I have to deal with myself, my family members. And so it's when this becomes unreliable, it has a really big impact on our lives.
And meanwhile, from Governor Inslee, some parting words to his now former employees.
We want them to know that we have appreciated their service to date, and we wish them well.
Well, it's not just the airlines having problems. The vaccine mandate-induced labor shortage also affecting nurses, teachers, and now the police. In Seattle, city officials are preparing to fire 40% of its entire workforce for refusing to get the shot by next Monday's deadline. Hasn't the defund the police movement already caused a shortage of police in your city?
Well, indeed it has, David, and we've lost up to 350 cops since the defund nonsense started. And basically, Seattle was the epicenter of that defund nonsensical activism. But if we lose more cops, say we lose 150, or even more than that, I can't state how bad this will be to our 911 response in terms of getting somebody to fill the uniform to meet your 911 call.
Yeah.
It is appalling what's happening here, and I can't for the life of me understand what the end game is, as 85% of the Seattle populace is vaccinated. Majority of our SPOG members are vaccinated.
Right.
But here we are again, and our 911 response will be critically impaired if we fire any cops over this mandate.
Well, just to put it in perspective, you have a workforce now of officers, just over 1,000 officers for a city of 750,000 people. That's 1/3 of what New York has per resident in terms of police officers. New York has about 35,000 officers. So for you to go much below what you're already limited to because of all the defund the police nonsense, I mean, essentially you're going to have crimes that you won't have enough police officers to answer for.
Well, it'll be like the running of the bulls, but with criminals here in Seattle, with no law enforcement to have an adequate stopgap between the lawlessness that's already here. And what I've heard a lot of people say, and I think that there's some semblance of reasonableness here, is that since we led the effort in the defunding nonsense where the council pledged 50%, our campaign against it got it down to 20, which I think was good for our people and our community. But I think what this is another extension of the defunding nonsense where they're just going to remove cops.
Well, it may be, but specifically on the vaccine mandate, does the city allow for any exemptions, either for for natural immunity or for some other physical problems?
Well, we're still in the bargaining process to come up with our version of what a reasonable accommodation looks like. But when I was approached by the mayor's office in terms of this mandate, when I asked them, what about those officers that have natural immunity that have beaten COVID?
You're one of them, by the way, aren't you?
Yes, I am. And their response to me was it's not backed up by science.
Tonight, the clock is ticking in Seattle, where all city employees must be fully vaccinated by Monday. But the looming deadline is getting pushback from some police officers who oppose a mandate, instead asking for other options like regular testing.
For some reason, this mayor is refusing that, which I think is unreasonable and is void of common sense.
Those who don't comply won't be fired right away. Instead, they can present their reasonings at a hearing. But the standoff comes amid a staffing crisis threatening public safety. And the Seattle Police Officers Guild says they can't afford to lose anyone.
Crime is surging in this city. Our community is demanding more police officers answer the 911 calls.
State troopers are also under a similar mandate, and longtime veterans are turning in their badges.
I'm being asked to leave because I am dirty. This is the last time you'll hear me in a state patrol car.
Monday, the 18th of October, I'll be turning in all my issued equipment back to the Washington State Patrol, and I will be involuntarily terminated.
It's a showdown in Chicago, too. The mayor and police union not backing down after city workers had until Friday to report their vaccine status. Their fight now tangled in the courts, with both sides filing lawsuits. And in Massachusetts, at least 150 members with the State Police Association have already resigned or intend to ahead of today's deadline to submit proof of vaccination. As the debate intensifies across the country, millions of Americans are waiting for guidance on boosters. Today, Dr. Anthony Fauci weighed in on the latest recommendation for J&J recipients.
Given the data that they saw, very likely this should have been a 2-dose vaccine to begin with.
And he's also spreading some good news this holiday season to those fully vaccinated.
There's no reason at all why you can't enjoy the holidays. And
number one cause of death in 2020 of law enforcement was COVID-19, nothing else. It's foolish to be trying to take a victory lap when so much is at stake. But unfortunately, that's in keeping with the leadership of this fraternal order of police. They will be vaccinated.
This as the city sees yet another violent weekend with 40 people shot, 3 killed since Friday.
The irony is she talks about our officers that have died from COVID. Thankfully, we haven't had an officer pass away for almost a year now, so clearly we have adjusted to our new reality. This isn't diminishing their memory because we will be having a formal memorial for those officers we lost last year at the FOP this week. But for her to talk about officers who died in the line of duty is disgusting. She has no credibility on the topic, and she should keep that out of her mouth.
Well, yeah, she's worried about people dying because of COVID, but what about all the people that are dying because of all this violence on the streets in Chicago? Just this weekend alone, 35 shot, 3 or 4, I've read 4 killed, I've heard 3 as well, but still, these are people's lives.
Ainsley, we have had 185 expressway shootings in Chicago this year. 185. That's just the expressways. The violence is out of control, and the superintendent and the mayor keep trying to say there's a decrease in the increase of the decrease. It is absurd. And I could tell you, we know we will have thousands of officers who are willing to not get paid to not get the vaccine. And this isn't just the Fraternal Order of Police like she keeps harping on. This is the Sergeants Association, the Lieutenants Association, and the Captains Association united in this fight that our members should not be forced to get a mandated vaccine. And
So
that's for all the city workers.
If they refuse to get the vaccine, how many did you say would probably be affected?
You know, we don't have exact numbers, but it's roughly, I would figure about 3,000 if we go with the informal surveys that have been done so far.
Well, if they don't get vaccinated, they're not out on the streets protecting the community. So the people of Chicago are affected.
Absolutely. And the violence is only going to get worse.
Tonight, a serious safety issue is coming to a head in multiple cities. Some police officers are resisting COVID vaccine mandates, potentially leaving their departments and their cities shorthanded. The issue is especially acute in Chicago, where homicides are up 55%, shootings up 68% since 2019.
If you can financially sustain a hit
then stick to your guns, take the hit, and we will fight it.
Chicago Police Union President John Catanzara is urging officers to ignore the looming deadline to report their vaccine status to the city. He's predicting if the city tries to punish officers for not complying, only half will show up to patrol city streets.
Any sergeant, lieutenant, captain, or above who gives you an order to go in that portal is not valid. You are able to refuse that order.
Can officers ignore direct orders from a supervisor?
They do so at their peril. Insubordination is not something that we can tolerate.
The policy announced by Mayor Lori Lightfoot in August requires all city employees to be fully vaccinated by tonight's deadline or risk being placed on no pay status. Workers can be unvaccinated through the end of the year if they undergo regular testing off the clock and out of their own pocket. The mayor insists the city will be safe.
Should citizens of Chicago be worried about their safety?
No, they shouldn't be. Obviously, we have contingency plans in place if they are necessary, but I'm confident that they're not going to be necessary.
It is not only Chicago police officers facing vaccine mandates. Hundreds of officers in Seattle and San Francisco could lose their jobs if they don't submit their vaccination status. Chicago Alderman Anthony Beal, a critic of Mayor Lightfoot, is worried about safety this weekend.
I implore that the governor of this great state of Illinois declare a state of emergency.